We often talk about the power of possibility when it comes to neurodivergent talent. But are we truly open to seeing that potential in action? If the thought of an autistic person using a chainsaw or welder makes you pause, it might be time to rethink how neuro-inclusive you really are. In this episode, Danny Combs joins me to discuss how his work is creating opportunities for neurodivergent individuals to thrive in skilled trades. We'll explore how breaking down barriers can unlock their potential and why it's time to move beyond our own assumptions. Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa Haskins, and welcome to Think Differently, the podcast that challenges the status quo and explores the power of neurodiversity to create a more inclusive and accessible world. Together, we will talk about everything from the value of different perspectives to the limitless potential of human beings. We'll explore how embracing differences can lead to endless possibilities and how you can maximize strengths to make a positive impact on the world. So sit back, relax, and join me as we get ready to think differently. So hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Think Differently. Today, I'm excited because we're going to dive into a critical conversation about how we can rethink about unlocking the potential of neurodivergent talent, especially in the skilled trades. Joining us today is Danny Combs, founder of TACT, and he's leading an organization that's changing how we create real employment opportunities for neurodistinct individuals. Danny's working how we shape businesses' approach to hiring, training, and supporting our neurodivergent employees. And he's here to share some practical insights on how we can all create more inclusive workplaces with neurodiversity in mind. So welcome, Danny. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate it.
And before we dive in, Danny, I'd like you to share what led you to create TACT and led your passion for neurodivergent inclusion.
Yeah. So my son, he's the catalyst for everything, why I kind of got to this point. So I was actually, it's kind of a fun story, but an interesting story. So I was fourth generation trade. So my great grandfather happened to be neighbors to a gentleman that started a company called Northrop Grumman. And then my grandfather did that too and worked in the aerospace field. And my dad was a general contractor. And so I grew up making and fixing things and working with my hands. And naturally, when you do that, you decide, heck, I'm going to run away to Nashville, right, and do music for a living, which is what I went and got a music degree and went away and did. And it worked out pretty well. And then a few years into being in Nashville, I was there for just over a decade. Had a beautiful, incredible son born named Dylan. And about 2 years into his life, we learned that the things that made him him were called autism. And when he was now 15 years old, but when he was diagnosed, he was about two, just a little over two or so. They didn't really have the resources that they do now, even though the resources still aren't great. They kind of just give you a book and they say, good luck, here you go. And he was about six and a half before he could even say, hello, Dad, I love you. But he could visualize and manufacture these incredible things. I was that dad that let my son play with scissors. So he was always building things and working with Dad out in the garage. And I didn't know, honestly, at first, if it was just the family background of the trades or maybe that was just one of his talents. And so at the time, we were going to all these different therapy groups and therapists for occupational, behavioral, and speech, and a variety of different therapies that were available at the time. And with that being said, everything that I kept hearing was all deficit-based. And not to put the therapist down at all, they were all doing great work. They were amazing. But they never highlighted his strengths and the things that he could do. And I could look at my amazing boy and see that he had so much talent. And so I started looking for a strengths-based program that utilized the skilled trades because he was good at it. It was like, okay, this is the thing that he's clearly good at. How do we use this to help him? And I couldn't find anything. And so I had the chance to meet Dr. Temple Grandin. And I said, hey, I've got this idea of starting this program that uses the trades, the vessel to develop strengths. What do you think? And she was like, you need to put down your guitar and go do it right now. And when Temple tells you to do something, you kind of do it. So I did. And it's grown to be this amazing thing. So we always joke that Temple told us to. So my son Dylan, he was definitely the catalyst for sure. He's 15 now again, so we've been doing it for a minute at this point. It's kind of fun.
So hearing about your story, it's very similar to mine.
Yeah, it's a lot of us, right? As parents, it's like that's our catalyst, right? To jump into this world for sure.
I think it's also interesting. You're a musician, we're musicians. So there's that connectivity. That's another podcast episode, the connectivity.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you about that sometime.
There is a trend. Musicians and engineers often have autistic children. So
It's very true.
definitely
very
a different
true.
conversation, but we have that similarity. I love that you saw this talent and then that Temple Grandin was your catalyst to say, put down your guitar, as wonderful as it is, and start this thing. So you start this thing. Now you were in Nashville, but you're in Colorado now. So did you start in Nashville and move your idea?
No, I ended up moving to Denver before starting it. And so Nashville at the time, honestly, and now they have the Frisk Center and they're doing amazing things. And Kayvon just won, the MacArthur Award. He's incredible, and all the things that they're doing there, the whole team there. But at the time, I was even having to travel to the surrounding counties because Davidson County, Nashville didn't have a ton of services. So I was driving out to Wilson County and Mount Juliet to get services, and Colorado was further ahead. And so actually moved out to Denver looking for better resources, and also kind of was going through that life crisis of just wondering what I wanted to do next and how to be there for my son. I mean, music was very successful. And so I moved out to Denver and started teaching music at a local academy and was working with my son, and then put together that idea and got it launched from there. And now it's grown. So I started it in the back of a 58 Chevy pickup truck because I'm a car guy. And if you're going to do something, you do it right, right? So you put it in a 58 Chevy. And so ended up doing that and driving to churches and rec centers and libraries, people's garages, and anywhere anybody would give us a chance. And it has grown from the back of a pickup to a 19,000 square foot facility where we now have a staff of almost 25. Last year, we had almost 1,000 clients, 952 to be exact, come through TACT, and it has grown to be the most successful transition to employment program in the state of Colorado, where we work with over 60 employers, and we're using welding and carpentry and automotive and electrical and cybersecurity and clean energy technology as vessels to develop employment skills. And we do our competency-based training with all of the individuals. And man, it's just awesome to see the opportunity that's there.
And so your son inspired it, but he's only 15. So he's a teen, like my son. So he's not really working yet. So you moved to Colorado and you're like, we're going to build this program to support trades. Mm-hmm. And so how have you been able to help businesses see that skilled trades are really the right starting point to support employment?
Yeah, we've always approached it from a different perspective. So for us, it's always been a value proposition rather than charity, which sounds really subtle, but it's a completely different shift on it. So I think where we've been fortunate and successful is we've always showcased the talent and potential of our clients and set them up for success to demonstrate that, and then worked with businesses for them to see that as how it was going to make their business more profitable, more efficient, more reliable. I mean, all of the things that you read about in countless studies, which now you're starting to hear about more and more. TACT's been doing this 8 years ago, started 8 years ago. So if you would have gone to somebody 8 years ago and said, hey, we've got, autistic talent, that's incredible. When you look at our neurodiversity community, the language that was being used 8 years ago, it's pretty wild to see how much it's shifted in the last 8 years. Like that was genuinely, not to sound arrogant, revolutionary for 8 years ago. Now it's like everybody's like, yes, okay, this is what we need to do with neurodiversity. And it's awesome how that language and that narrative is still being framed by our community. But it's been a lift, right, to get this far for sure. And so it's almost kind of a privilege. And I feel fortunate that our team played a small role, and it feels like getting that narrative across, at least here in Colorado. And so because there's been such a labor shortage in the skilled trades for so long, it's almost worked out exquisitely well that they have been willing to embrace our community. And since they've already embraced English as a second language, The irony is that they already put in place this beautiful framework for our community where they've already developed color coding, task analysis, pictures, all of these things, the way that things are laid out with skeleton boards and a variety of different things that we would use in here in TACT, where they reframed their environment for employees to be successful. They weren't thinking about the neurodiverse community at the time. They were thinking about, English as a second language employees, but like they did it. And so it's been amazing how well that's worked out. And like a lot of things, it's almost serendipitous in a way that like a lot of our electrical partners, for example, because of the shortage, they've been pre-manufacturing everything in warehouses because they haven't had the talent to go out and do it in the field. So they've already put in place warehouses where everything's been manufactured in one place. So our clients, even like when you start looking at transportation, for example, our clients can go to one facility and do the task. And it's a variety of different tasks. It's pretty neat, actually, like how it's all coming together. At least here in Colorado, as we travel around and speak to different places, there's, different states and different locations are in different places.
And so when you're looking at the skilled trades, are you placing your employees? So just to give the audience a better sense,
we have an 83.3% placement rate. And so we place hundreds of clients. And then our average graduate's wage is $19.86. So the wages are also amazing. And it does seem a little deceitful just because skilled trades actually pays really well, which most people don't know about. They always thought about white collar jobs, tech as the great paying jobs. The trades and the blue collar work pays really, really well. So it's not just the entry level positions that our community has been tasked with in the past. If our community still chooses that, the trades are the vessel for us. If they choose to get an education here and go and work at a grocery store or a restaurant or a coffee house, God bless them. We will help them do that all day long if that's what their heart wants and they want to do. Traditionally, though, those positions haven't paid as well as some electricians or carpenters or mechanics pay. So those wages for those positions seem to be higher. And then we have a full team of job coaches too. So on your question about employment, so we use in-person job coaching. So we found that to be really a big factor as well. So I know a lot of organizations are limited by just the geographical scope of their work and have utilized, FaceTime or Zoom or different platforms to help with job coaching. We found there hasn't been a replacement for having an actual physical being in the room with that, graduate of ours learning and working. That seems to be the most successful path that we've found so far.
So our listeners cannot see us, but I can tell we're of a similar generation. And there was a really...
Your hair's not as gray as mine, so you're doing good.
But there was a real push for college and higher education. Mm-hmm. And we do see, we know businesses are screaming, they need trades. And so where are you seeing the entry point and how are you helping parents see the value in the trades? Are they coming out of high school? Are you getting them before high school? Where are we seeing this getting adopted?
All of it. So we're fully accredited secondary and post-secondary, which we're really proud of. And so we just helped create a new law here in Colorado, creating an entirely new public school designation called a specialized day school, which allows students to choose TACT as their transition program, specifically with vocation in mind, which within itself is a pretty new gateway and pathway for our community. And the schools themselves are still learning about it since it's brand new, which is very, very exciting. That brings a lot of funding and opportunity for our community too, which is pretty cool. So there's that portion of it.
When you see because I think thanks to Autism at Work, everyone thinks that autistic people are the best technology coders, right? It just exploded in the tech space. Listeners, are you hearing? We're talking engineering, plumbing. What are the trades that you're supporting and diversifying?
So we have welders, we have auto mechanics, we have carpenters, we have tech as well. We have all of the hands-on trades we have found use our students, recognize our students' talent, embrace them completely. The tech is an interesting one as it seems like it was low-hanging fruit. And it's awesome. And there's definitely a lot of programs that got a lot of acclaim from that, really fantastic. as far as big corporations that have jumped on board. It's interesting, though, again, looking at those programs, because you're right, those kind of neurodiversity at work programs years ago were definitely the catalyst to start getting that conversation started. When you look at them at the grand picture of things like Microsoft, who supports us too, they're wonderful. They're fantastic. They have 300 people in their neurodiversity work program. They have 30,000 employees. That doesn't look like inclusivity to me, 300 out of 30,000. That still looks like tokenism. And so start looking at it in the sense of like, okay, recognizing, yes, all of those platforms are wonderful. They have found gateways and they're embracing it. However, what we're finding is that 20% of the trades organizations that we work with are finding that their other employees, just like tech companies, are already neurodistinct individuals themselves that didn't know it. And then now, as we're talking about neurodiversity at work, those employees are coming to us and saying, oh my gosh, until talking to you, this explains me. This explains my father. This explains my mother, and they're starting to realize that too and getting the supports in place for that. So there's a lot of studies out of the UK that are showcasing that even in the skilled trades, at least 20% of the population working in there are already neurodiverse, which echoes perfectly all the other neurodiversity statistics that you're already reading about, right? Which makes perfect sense. So I think, in my opinion, and this could be controversial to say, what has happened is that the trades were looked at as lesser than, and B, also looked at harder to do for our community in a lot of different ways. It's much easier to put an iPad or a laptop in the hands of an autistic kid than put them on a welding torch or on a table saw. And when we started TACT, we were turned down for insurance 13 times because people looked at us and they were like, wait, you're going to put autistic kids in a carpentry shop with saws, with, engines with moving parts and hot motor oil and metal that gets hot. And they looked at us like it wasn't going to be possible. Even to the degree when you look at the fact that TACT, and we had this verified because we got to present at the White House last year, that we're still the only program doing this, still showcases why. Like, why is no one else looking at our community and talking about the skilled trades? We've all known for years that the trades are in demand for employment. There's tech bubbles opening everywhere. And that's awesome. I mean, not to put those down at all. Like, God bless them. Let's support them and help them. They're moving the needle for employment for our community forward, which is exactly what we need. However, there's also been that bias and biases towards what the skilled trades looks like for employment opportunities. I mean, the cool thing about Gen Z coming up, despite, what the common nomenclature is about them, like they're looking at the trades and saying, why do I want $250,000 in debt for a college degree when I can go work in the trades? And I can make that really pretty quickly. I mean, our graduates are making six figures within a few years of graduating from our program. I mean, we just partnered with a company called Empower, which is a big financial institution. Their starting salaries are $80K. My goodness, that's awesome. I mean, that's tech. I mean, for the tech example, but still, like, there's all these opportunities for our students to do amazing things that they don't need college degrees for. And if they want to get a college degree, cool, tax fully accredited secondary, and all of those credits count. So they can use it towards that degree if that's what they choose to do. However, what we're finding is that a lot of states are recognizing talent. They're looking at experience. They're looking at portfolios. It seems like the overall hierarchy of hiring and onboarding of talent is finally starting to shift from the old-fashioned, sit across from somebody and talk about how pretty the waiting room is and your favorite sports team and how great the furniture is in the office and how cool the architecture, like the BS stuff that doesn't really matter at all, that people hire off of, right? Those social skills, not really hiring off of the actual technical skills. At the end of the day, if your toilet isn't working and you need your toilet fixed, do you really care if your plumber doesn't make perfect eye contact with you? Does that really matter? I don't think so. And so, I mean, in most cultures in the world, making perfect eye contact is considered rude. And I mean, like, as we're sitting here talking on a Zoom, and I know that the listeners are listening to audio, I'm not making eye contact with you. I'm just talking. So what are the things that we value when it comes to what good employees look like? I think we're finally at a neat point where that's starting to shift.
Yeah. And I want to take you back a little bit because you said something and it's a little controversial, but it's kind of a paradigm that we're living through we go back and we've made so much headway in terms of autism inclusion and
Yep.
neurodiversity, and there's so much more appreciation for it. But then you tell the story about the obstacles, the
Hmm.
ableistic views of, but can you
Yeah.
trust an autistic person with
A
a welding
hundred
machine? By
percent.
the way,
Yeah.
they don't have an intellectual deficit. They don't.
No. Yeah. No, I mean but there's a perception, right? And I think the way, Temple, to quote her, and I know even sometimes now she's considered controversial, but I mean her great quote, like, different, not less. I mean, like, looking at our community, for whatever reason, people have societally looked at autism as, lesser than, rather than looking at the strengths. And I mean, that's where I'm going back to the strengths. Even now, when you start looking at, if you are looking for services, the different government services that are available, whether through Medicaid or your state's vocation rehabilitation or whatever agency in your state provides services, they're going to ask you to tell them what's quote unquote wrong. They're not going to ask you what's right and
Right.
how they can support you. They're going to say, tell me what's wrong with you and how we can, give you money to address that.
Well, because if there's nothing wrong with you, they won't help you. So there is that double edge.
Exactly. There is that, right? And so, I mean, even if you're looking at it from that, and I mean, I'm sure parents and you as a parent, I don't know if you've read some of those reports that they write about your kids, but it's heartbreaking. Like, and you start looking at it and it's like, this isn't my child. Like, what are they talking about? And they're missing all of those other things too. And though, I mean, it's important to say that we shouldn't dismiss the fact that there are real obstacles, but there are real obstacles with every human being on this planet. And so there are definitely things that I need to work on, just like my son needs to work on. And that's what makes life a journey and makes it fun. I can't imagine if I would have grown up in an educational or a family institution where, like, the only things that were ever like focused on were the things that I need to structure and do better. I mean, I learned the trades because my dad took the time to be in the garage with me all the time and teach that, and my grandfather and my great grandfather. And when you look at that knowledge that was passed down of 4 generations, that was the knowledge that was the catalyst for me to start TACT, because it was
Right.
me as the teacher. And that's the stuff that I learned from them. And when you look at like their education too, like my grandfather helped design the lunar module. In fact, in my home office, I have his original drawings from Grumman when they designed it, which is pretty cool. They should probably be in a museum somewhere, honestly, rather than in my office, because they're pretty amazing. Um, but he didn't have a college degree. He had a high school, diploma and Air Force experience, which is amazing. And they gave him more than college probably would. And being Air Force myself, I would definitely echo that. And so, looking at that, he put Neil Armstrong on the moon. We value now college as like that little piece of paper means somehow it's your ticket to success. And it's an incredible achievement for anybody that goes to college. I mean, you have a doctorate. I have a master's degree. You beat me. So you got the PhD. I don't have that. But like, I have a master's degree. Yay. But like, and those things helped for sure. Not to discount them or dismiss them at all. But are they the only thing that's going to help somebody be successful? I don't think so. And I think, the life skills that my parents taught are good things. And so if somebody comes through here at TACT, they don't want to be a carpenter, they don't want to be a welder, but they develop the skills that are going to help them be successful in life. Heck yeah, that's amazing. And so I hope we can continue to do more of that.
I love it. I love all of that. And I think about, we recently did a remodel, and my son also did an internship at NASA. He had as much fun
Yeah.
calculating quasar redshifts as he did learning how to use the saw to cut tile, right? Like,
Yeah.
and oftentimes when we talk about different things, and I know you have a story about this, so I'm going to segue it up, where we talk about your son or daughter could learn how to do tile too and learn how to use the wet saw and all these things. And a parent will go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
my kid could never do that. Well, how do you know if you
Mm-hmm.
never give them the opportunity, if you never even give them the opportunity to learn it? Like,
Yeah.
sometimes I think the deficit is a self-fulfilling prophecy because I don't think you can. I don't even give you the opportunity to try.
It's so true. No, I mean, and you hit the nail on the head, right? Like the fact that TACT is a program, the only program that we're aware of that is doing this. There are segments, I mean, in full credit. Like, I mean, you look at John Oliver Robinson, who's an incredible autistic man. He runs a Bentley shop, right? I mean, there are spots that are hubs in different places, but it's incredibly atomized at best, and it's not as cohesive as what we're doing here by any means. But when you look at the way public education and trades are set up, they're not set up, unfortunately, those poor teachers for success. If you have 35, 45 students per class, we're aware of a neurotypical trade school it's a for-profit institution. They have 60 kids or 60 young adults per class. Holy heck. Like if you have 60 individuals in a class and one instructor, how are you possibly going to be able to meet the needs of all of those individuals? So our entire educational framework isn't set up for our students to be successful, nor was it ever intended to be. I mean, that's when you start, that's a whole other rabbit hole to get down, the education, framework of why it's set up the way it is. But by creating an environment for our community to be successful, they can be successful. I mean, when you come to TACT, with a few exceptions of us embracing universal design and the way that our facility is laid out, our space looks like, walks like, talks like, quacks like a trade school. And that's the way it should be. Our kids shouldn't have something lesser than. And still, when they do get the opportunity in those situations in more traditional, comprehensive, neurotypical environments, they're usually put on iPads in the back. Like, okay, we're going to learn about engine rebuilding today. Here's an iPad. I want you to watch a YouTube video about it. That has merit and that has value. Those things do help. That shouldn't be all of it, but that should be just a piece of it. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like our kids are getting that opportunity or the experience to discover it. And frankly, parents need to give their kids that chance, because that was a big hurdle for us too. You should have seen the wide eyes on some of our parents when we were like, all right, thanks. We're going to take your kid here back now here with a saw. Their eyes would get so big, and then they would watch their child succeed, and then they would start crying and like, oh my gosh, they can do it. I didn't know. And then that individual, you could just almost feel the empowerment of how successful they felt. I mean, you could almost it was palpable. I mean, it still is. I mean, it's one of my favorite parts still. It's one of those things that keeps you going when you get to see how incredible your clients are and how well they're doing.
So I'm hearing there are barriers at all levels. It's the narrative that parents are taught and then begin to believe. We have a helicopter parent society to begin with, neurodivergent.
Yes.
So there's all these things happening. Now, I know you have your schools and you're training them up, but then it's time to go to work. How are you working with those 990 plus businesses?
Well, clients we had, but it's 60 business. Yeah. So that's a great. So once we get our clients, so every client that comes through here, we work and we develop an individualized education plan for what we want for that client, what they want for themselves, more importantly. And then we look to find the right pairing. The way that integrated supported employment has traditionally been done is there's been placement agencies of some sort, and then employer partners that frankly haven't looked at it, kind of painting a broad brush here. There are, of course, outliers that are as a value proposition, but rather as a charity type situation, or maybe they're getting a kickback from the government, or who knows what their reason is. But they say, okay, I've got an individual, we've got a job, great, let's put the two together. But your background music, my background music, if a band is looking for a guitar player, and you're like, here's somebody, they've never played guitar before, and you put them with the band, and then they're on stage, the band's not going to be happy. The audience isn't going to be happy. That person that's asked to play guitar isn't going to be happy. There has to be a training component element to it that sets that individual up for success. And then they need to be placed into a position that recognizes their strength and talent to help them be successful in that place of their own choice. So it's multifaceted and layered in that regards. And so looking at it from that perspective, when we bring a client to one of our 60 plus employer partners, we're pre-vetting which candidates are going to be successful so that they're getting quality candidates from that. And then, we're looking at things like transportation. Transportation is a big issue for our community. If they don't have transportation to get to something that's a different part of town, in Denver, it can take, an hour to get 10 miles because of traffic. So they're 10 minutes or 10 miles away. Some people could look at that and think it's only 10 miles. That's an hour. Or if they're taking public transportation, that's 2 hours each way. So all of a sudden, that individual is tasked with 4 hours of travel every day. They're not going to do that. No one's going to do that. Why would you put up with that kind of situation? And so there has to be a level of thoughtfulness that's put into it. And then working with those employers, and I also co-founded the Colorado Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce, which is the first neurodiverse chamber of commerce in the country. And part of that is the other side of the coin, working with those businesses and developing those trainings, helping their new inclusion practices, all of those different things.
I love it. Oh, and what I like is that you're going at it from the different spokes. It's not just training the individuals, it's educating the employers to understand how to manage a strengths-based team. And it's an interesting thing because employers like to say the word team, but I don't see them running teams. I see them creating.
It's hard, right? It's so hard. Tim Goldstein, who's an amazing individual, talks about people like the agreeable ones, right? Like their team is like, who can we get to agree and work in our little tribe where we're all echoing it? But like our community, they are agreeable and alignable, but they're also going to share their opinion. And sometimes people don't like that on the team, right? So how about that?
So I feel like there is a shift. And maybe you were part of that shift. Maybe the world is waking up and going, we need more trades, we need more skills. We know there's talent shortages. And then we have AI and automation. How do you see the trend evolving for our population? I think it's going to get better, but do you see any obstacles we haven't?
Oh, there's so many obstacles. We're barely getting started. Yes, you are 100% right. It seems like people are becoming more aware of neuroinclusion and neurodiversity. When the Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce was started 2 years ago, the biggest question we got is, what is neurodiversity? And that was 2 years ago. I can't tell you how many emails we would get a day with businesses reaching out and be like, what does this mean? They're still doing that. It's not as much because people are becoming more aware of it, but it's wild how many businesses are still learning. In fact, it feels like if you get out of certain metropolitan areas sometimes too, you're in certain demographics, even in metropolitan areas, they might know, but a lot don't. And so there's still just a heavy lift of awareness. And then there's also going to be the heavy lift of embracing it, supporting it, the employees that are already there, onboarding. It's a total reframing of employment. You still look at the average temperature in an office building is still 68 degrees. That was established in the 1950s for the average 5'10" white male. When you walk through an office building, you're going to see people shivering and still cold. Why are we still doing that? Why are we still asking generic questions like, are you proficient in Microsoft Excel? Are you a proficient communicator? In broad terms that don't really ask a real question at all. And then wondering why aren't we getting people applying? Well, what did you expect? Have you ever met anybody that's really a proficient communicator or proficient in Microsoft Excel? I know people that can BS their way through it, but are really proficient, very, very few. So if you want, real employees, ask real questions. And it's just, there's a long way to go. Maybe in 10 years, we'll get there. There was a great study that just came out of the UK that talked about how 50% of HR managers admitted openly that if their employees disclosed as neurodiverse, they would fire those employees. 50% in this century. Oh my gosh. The fact that that's still taking place, it feels like the 1950s still in a lot of different ways. So, there's a lot of business practices that need to change and before we get there.
And I think it's a good thing if the listeners didn't hone in on it, is that one of the great things about social media is people like us can find each other. But the danger of social media is it curates to you. So those that know what neurodiversity is or have an autistic child or are neurodivergent themselves, the world feels like it's more inclusive than it is because your feeds, whether it's Facebook, Twitter X, whatever it's called this week, Instagram, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're reading, it's curating to you. And then I think folks forget that our best guesstimate is about 10 to 15% of the population is neurodivergent in some ways, which means the flip side of that number is 85% of the population is not. So I think it was earlier this year, I heard somebody say during Autism Awareness Month, they said we need to go past awareness and go to acceptance. And I was like, based on my experience, we're still at awareness. If somebody's aware, I think it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If people are aware, then you get them to acceptance. If they are accepting it, then you get them to inclusion. But we have a lot of the world. I did, like you said, you had businesses reaching out to you. I did professor teach-ins where we were talking about universal design for neurodivergent learners. And I said, tell me what you know about neurodiversity. And we talked about what is neurodiversity because they weren't even like, what is that? So I think that there is a bit of a divide in the sense of those in the space, we know it pretty well.
Oh,
and there's this
100%.
huge gap.
You're exactly right. And that there's a feedback loop, right? Where those of us that are in it are refining it and talking to each other and work, but like it's definitely not expanding beyond our community in a lot of ways. When the Chamber of Commerce was started, the Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce, that was 2022. And the catalyst for that is TACT had won a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Award. And in that time of winning that award, I was at a table with a whole bunch of businesses that are one in the for-profit sector of a variety of different sizes. And they were all talking about the variety of chambers. They were in the Black Chamber of Commerce, the Women's Chamber of Commerce, the LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce, and their initiatives. And then they got to me and I was talking about neurodiversity. And unanimously, they looked at me and said, what's neurodiversity? And these were the leaders of in the community in a metropolitan city that had no idea. And then it was just like, oh my gosh, like we have to get this going. And that's when Dr. Kelly and Tiffany Feingold and I got it started. But at that point, and that was 2022, it's still gone a long way. But how can it be? And when you start looking at DEI initiatives worldwide, only 4% statistically embrace disability, neurodiversity, anything as, so there is, you're right that, there's still a whole lot more awareness that needs to take place. And with that awareness, we have to be, I think at this time, be really authentic in the way that we're portraying strengths. And why I brought up like the Microsoft thing earlier, and the S&P and HP, they've done great things. Lots of studies, the Harvard Business Review on task time and attendance and all of these different things, and they're great. But the spectrum is large and the spectrum is wide, and we don't want to pigeonhole one group as a broad brush, because what we've also then been hearing is a narrative of like neurodiversity is a superpower, and neurodiversity is an amazing ability for neurodistinct individuals. But if we share that message with employers, that they're going to be like, I want to hire superhuman, super employees. And if they don't see that when they get that right away, they look at the hiring agencies and they go, and then it creates a different narrative at that. So I think, not to say that neurodistinct individuals aren't super, that's not what I'm saying. But I hope you understand what I'm saying is I think we have to authentically, again, showcase the value proposition of our community and approach it from that perspective.
And I like that authenticity and the realism that autistic people, ADHD, neurodivergent people are people. So you will have exceptional individuals and you will have average individuals and you'll have people that need support. Like that's just the human.
It's the human biodiversity of our species. And so it can't be framed, in my opinion, as like, neurodiversity is like our portion of biodiversity is like the chic, going to change and there is a level to that for sure, but there's a level to that in any form of diversity. So painting black and white broad brushes of extremes, most of life is in the gray in any category. So I think the moment you get to, polarized one side of like everything is amazing, nothing in life, everything is amazing. I love my dog. Not everything about my dog is amazing. I love my children. Not everything about my children is amazing. I love my house. Not everything about my house. Like that's just not the way the world works. And so I think we just have to be real and authentic as we're communicating that.
So you are a pretty big stone making ripples out. I know that I could talk to you for the next 2 hours, but we don't have that amount of time. So my listeners are all walks of life. Some are business leaders, they're HR leaders, some are parents, some are autistic or neurodivergent themselves.
Yeah.
You're doing this in Colorado. Obviously, you can't, maybe someday you would, but we would like to see this type of effort, this type of focus grow. Whether you're a parent, business leader, teacher, what could they do to start help move the needle, even from an awareness perspective?
Yeah, well, the first part, so we just partnered with a company called FedCap, which is a New York-based multinational nonprofit. That's workforce development education to bring TACTs more places. So we're proactively and actively working in Austin, Texas, as well as Manhattan to make this possible, as well as across Colorado. So in the next few years, you're going to see TACTs in more places, which is pretty cool. We're excited about that. In regards to what parents can do, I think they have to let their kids take chances. I think that they have to be willing and able and open enough to like say, can my kid do this? Why don't we find out? I mean, there was an element when we were children of discover and wonder and creation and exploration where we were allowed to be those kids that would go outside and play and run and have those experiences. My parents had no idea where I was half the time in the afternoon. Most parents won't let their kids leave their yard anymore without knowing where they are. And if it's because they're autistic, why? Like, what is it in their mindset that means, okay, autistic means they can't leave their yard? Recognizing that we have to give the equality of opportunity to all individuals, whatever form of diversity that means. And so I think first, having parents embrace those opportunities, if they can give those experiences. I mean, I recognize that those experiences, for different socioeconomic classes can be difficult to attain. And in some places, based on your geography, if you're in a rural environment that doesn't have the same kind of opportunities, you might not get that either. So, but it's the opportunity to do it. And then when you see people doing it, get behind them. I think too, one great example of TACT is we had a local car dealership. This is a bad example, but it's an example. Embrace us for 1 April, they wanted custom license plate frames to represent TACT to bring awareness and acceptance. How cool is that? Car dealership that hires us that has like 10 locations, cars all over the Denver metro area. I mean, they're a household name here in the Denver metro area, do that. Now, on the back of a license plate frame, you're talking like a 1-inch by maybe 6-inch piece. So how do you do that? How do you get a message if somebody's driving by you on the highway at 60 miles an hour, they see that and they see autism, and acceptance. And by the way, it's not like frames have the option to be a lot of different colors. So it was blue frame because it was April. And then it said, build with TACT, autism, employment awareness, and it did have puzzle pieces on it. This was like 2021, something like that. And we had so many people upset that we had blue frames and puzzle pieces, and that's okay. And then we'd ask them, well, how would you reframe it to get autism acceptance across at 60 miles an hour in a 1-inch frame that's 6 inches long? And we didn't get a single suggestion. And so while that's okay, they weren't happy with us that we did it that way, then that's totally fair. If they're going to offer that critique, but also want the same awareness and acceptance and not offer an opinion of how to get it done, that does not help. And so I think if there needs to be a level of, if there's a better idea to do it, man, let's do it. We're all lifeline. Let's do this. Let's jump in together. But criticism for criticism's sake doesn't really help anything. So I think that's a dangerous pathway that some parents slip into.
The only good news out of that story, and it's a lesson I learned in PR, is all press is good press. So whether they were happy or not, you raised awareness.
Exactly. And people see those license plates buzzing around all these years later. And how cool is that?
That's fantastic. So this is like one of the fastest hours I think I've had in a long time. Is there anything, how can people get involved? I know you're in Colorado, but you are expanding. How can people get involved? Or if they want support or ideas, how can they connect with you?
Well, we're open book. I mean, that's one thing that's pretty unique about us is we're parents, all of us that are working here and running it, and at least that got it started. So our email addresses are our real email addresses on the website. So if they visit our website of www.buildwithtact.org, they'll actually get real contact information to reach out to us. So we hope that they do, and then we can share resources too. So that would be the best way, is to go to our website or our social media and connect with us and go from there.
Danny, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me today. I hope everybody really takes this away. I always believe that people need to focus more on the power of potential, and people don't realize it unless they have opportunity. And I'm just so grateful that you are creating opportunity for a very talented population that has yet to be realized. So I can't thank you enough for all you're doing.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the time. I appreciate it. It's great getting a chance to talk to you. So thank you so much.
I hope we have the opportunity to talk again.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Think Differently. I hope you found our discussion today insightful and thought-provoking. I want to thank AudioWorks Studios for their exceptional production and recording support. Without their expertise and dedication, this podcast would not be possible. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to share it with others. Your support helps us to reach new audiences and promote neurodiversity in our world. Also, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite platform so that you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. We look forward to seeing you again soon on Think Differently.